Today, I want to talk about something that took place between my son and I, and this is what we call a conflict, especially a conflict that a lot of dads might view as undermining our authority. And I want to just give my specific example, talk about something that happened a couple years ago with me and my own father, and just tie it all into how we can use such conflicts as opportunities. Before I jump into the story, my name is Odini McBean. I am the host of the 365 Dad podcast. You can check that out in the show notes. And my aim is to help millennial dads parent non traditionally, to help them realize they're as much masculine as they are feminine, and to help them tap into a mindfulness and a self reflection practice that will essentially help them not only in your role as a dad, but also as your role as a man, your higher self. So that's what I'm all about. So I like to do these YouTube talks as they seem a little bit more, formal. They seem a little bit more conversational than when I got the headphones on and I'm doing the podcast. So hopefully, these type of talks are welcomed. So anyway, let's get to the story. So the other day, my son is 13 years old, seventh grader. We were in the car and I was telling him, hey, listen, your talent on the basketball court can only take you so far, like your natural height, like your just, source given talent can only take you so far. I was telling him that he needs to take a little more priority in the off the court work, stretching, the dribbling, even on court things that are not just when the team practices. So I was reminding him, I was like, do you remember when, like, you were like 8 years old and you used to knock on my door at 6 in the morning and you used to wake me up to go work out? I was like, I need you to tap into that because eventually other kids are going to figure that work aspect out. And don't get me wrong, I always say this, my son is a great talent and he loves the game of basketball and he is a hard worker, right? He works harder than a lot of kids that are his age, but I know his potential and he has set some lofty goals for himself. And I'm just trying to show him that these goals are not going to come to fruition if you're not focusing on the system and the process of the work to get to it. So basically, I could tell he was like frustrated, like he didn't want to hear about this on the way to dinner, clearly. And soon as I was telling him, like, yo, there's a gym, there's an empty basketball court at the school that you practice at. We should just go there an hour prior to practice and get some real work in. And he was like, how are we going to do that, Dad? Right? He basically, and then he looked at me in the face too, like, how are we going to do that, Dad? And I'm like, okay, so now here I am, right? Mr. Meditator, Mr. Journaling, Mr. Self Reflection. And I had a choice in the moment. A lot of the times when dads hear about, you should react this way, you should react that way, it kind of also feels like a false reality because in the moment is what really matters. Nothing you see on a screen, nothing you hear is going to prep you for the in the moment unless you are truly doing the inner work. And even then, it's tough. Take it from somebody who I dedicate a lot of hours to inner work, right? And in that moment when he raised his voice at me, I had a choice: match the energy, right? Or practice what I preach. Practice what I preach to not only my audience, not only my clients, but also what I preach to him. And in that moment, I didn't. I did not practice what I preached. Eventually I did, but in the snap, in the heat of the moment, I basically looked at him. I parked the car, I unbuckled my seatbelt, and I looked at him in his face and I said, "What's up?" Right? I said, "Well, what's up?" I'm talking to you like this, and you're here, and that won't work. So what you trying to do? Like, you tough? What, you want to fight? What's up? And there was complete silence. And I would say, A, we've all been there, and B, if you have been there or if you are going to be in that position again in the future, it is completely okay to have some grace, some compassion for yourself, because you are a human and you are not perfect. What you do after those moments, that's what matters. That's what I always tell dads I work with. In adversity or heated conversations with your children or your spouse or whoever, what you do directly after that moment is the work at full display. So I yelled at him back. I matched his energy, right? I was like this, he was like this, and then I also was like that. I matched his energy. Am I proud of it? No, I'm not. But am I able to be aware of that and not judge it and try to fix it? Yes. And that's what this is all about. So many times as dads, we want to wear a cape, a mask, because society tells us to. And whenever that mask is in jeopardy of being pulled off, we snatch it right back on. And in that moment, I can feel my adrenaline wanting me to keep the mask on. But, I was like, you know what? I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. Like, I am going to let this mask come off. And by doing that, probably like 10 seconds now, 10 seconds of heated silence feels like a lifetime. So, probably like 10 seconds of silence, I just said, hey, Caleb, listen, uh, I apologize. I apologize for matching your tone. As the adult, that's not supposed to happen. I apologize. Boom. There's an apology. Right after that, I said, but I just want you to know the way that you spoke to me, that can't work. We cannot have conversations. We cannot have disagreements. Like that is not going to work for me. It's not going to work for us. I apologized, but I still kept the boundary, right? So once I apologized and kept the boundary, we then had another moment of silence. So then I asked him, how are you feeling right now? Took some time for him to gather his words, but essentially advised me that, he was frustrated. Like, he feels like a lot of people, and I am the dad, I promise you, I am not the basketball dad that's like, and you got to do this, and I don't want it more than my son wants it. I am the dad that I am actually really chill, right? When I feel like there's a lack of effort, I may speak up, but I am actually like really chill. At games, you don't hear my voice. When we work out, I'm very like supportive. So I am not the dad that is like putting an immense pressure on him. But I, in that moment, I realized because he's such a good player, everyone is putting pressure on him, whether it's intentional or not, because his ability to perform well is usually going to determine if the team wins or loses, right? It's not like other players on a team that can play terrible or have a bad game, and that's just, no one's there's no microscope on those players. So for him, there's a microscope, and he's at like a stage level 2 puberty, even though he's 5'9" and wears a size 11 shoe. But it, I say all that to say he's still like a baby, low key, right? You know what I mean? And so that's a lot of pressure that he faces, and he plays basketball year round. So I could imagine, and he plays for his travel team, he plays for his uh, middle school team. So I could imagine 5 to 7 days a week, this kid is facing immense pressure. So, and that's what led him to outbursts. So I also took the time to tell him, like, there was a couple years ago when he was in the living room and we were at my parents', and my dad and I got into like a really bad yelling match. Hurtful things were said. It was bad. And in that moment, maybe a couple of days later, I apologized to not only my father, but I apologized to my son, because we can't model that. He can't grow up thinking this is how we should speak to our fathers. So I apologized to him, and I brought that back up. I said, "Yo, I know you saw me and Grandpa have this, shouting match a couple years ago, and I just want you to know I've learned from that, and I apologized to you back then, just like I'm apologizing to you for my part in our altercation. But I want you to know when things happen, it's okay to be accountable for your mistakes." So I even brought up that conversation. And, we went into Pancheros, ate dinner. It was a little awkward, but then once I asked him, like, "Yo, how are you feeling, honestly?" Again, that seemed to shifted everything. And then I dropped him off to his mom's, where he told me to come in so I can listen to read this poem he wrote for my daughter, his little sister, and it was just like this beautiful poem. He's so talented, right? So he wrote this amazing poem for my daughter, and the night just ended with a hug and "I love you," and I left. And I went home, and I think if you would have told me the night would have ended like that based off of how things were in the car, would I be? I don't think I was gonna say I would have been surprised, but not really, because ever since I've been doing this type of journey in my life, especially in fatherhood, I realized, like, you can hold space for everything. Like, you can hold space for conflict, you can hold space for adversity, you can hold space for growth, because that's all you're doing when you and your kid go back and forth and you're triggered and they're triggered. It's usually not about the other person. It's usually what you're dealing with internally, what they're dealing with internally, and it just reflects and projects as that. So I actually really feel like if both parties have that understanding, that, all right, um this is not truly about him, it's not truly about me, then you're able to kind of come to a mutual agreement on what's truly important, and that's just really the growth and the connection.